Good evening. Welcome to the 8 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. We're going to talk about live-in relationships tonight here on this show. Live-in relationships that are becoming more prevalent across the country. As we move with modern times, there are adults who are choosing to live with each other, couples who are choosing to live with each other, people in relationships doing that without getting married. And it's a choice that these adults are actually making. But often in our society, it's not seen or really taken in very keenly. Often, even in the biggest of the metro cities, if you see, there is a bit of an aversion to such live-in relationships, to acknowledging them, to accepting them, and what is worse is even giving them the space to live. Even if the adult couple is wanting to live together without choosing to get married, but build a life together, even have a family together, more than the courts, it's actually people in our country who are still struggling to accept this. Just like the court decriminalized homosexuality, but it's the people, many of them in our country, who are still struggling to accept it as part of our society. Similarly comes this concept of live-in relationships. Why am I talking about it today, though? The Allahabad High Court has yet again said something that we at Mirror Now have always been talking about, which is the choice of adults, choice of a couple, of an individual, and how certain things need to be seen from that lens. The court said that this is required to be viewed from lens of personal autonomy. That live-in relationships shouldn't be viewed from the notions of social morality and whatnot. That right to life is liable to be protected at all costs. So even as we speak about social acceptance, at least the law and order machinery, the police, the protectors of law, custodians of law must ensure protection to such people. The court said couples complaining threat to life must be protected, that the police is obligated to protect rights of couples. Now, this isn't the first time. To really put this in perspective, various judgments have come on various aspects of live-in relationships and how they need to be treated in our country about people's rights. For example, in 2015, one of the orders that came said that it is an acceptable norm and that at passing time, the society has accepted it. A relation does not attract penal action. Just because you're not married and living together doesn't mean that you will have to face penal action, criminal action. There was another verdict that came in 2018 where the court said couple has the right to live together even outside wedlock, that live-in relationships are now recognized by legislature. In case you have any misconceptions, it is recognized by law, and that the choice would be of the girl as to whom she really wants to live. Repeatedly, we have said it is the choice of an individual and not anybody else. Nevertheless, let me give you some examples of what really happens in reality, and I'm sure all of you living in big towns and metro cities would have witnessed or heard about such stories. There was one example that came in from Delhi where a landlord refused to rent homes to live-in couples, saying that it will have bad influence on children. That was their argument. In Mumbai, a landlord asked couple to show their marriage certificate, saying that the neighbors will object if the house is rented out to an unmarried couple. In Kerala, over 15 landlords denied renting out house to a woman, saying that we cannot allow such a relationship in this society. In Bengaluru, a landlord refused renting out apartment to a girl who was in a live-in relationship, saying it is illegal to stay in a live-in relationship. Somebody needs to tell him it is not. In Indore, a man refused an apartment for rent, and the landlord actually called the police and threatened action and issued this man warnings. This is the bit, viewers, that we are looking to change. We're looking to change this with conversations, have more conversations about our choices, our right to choose as an adult, and how nobody really can then tell us who we should live with, how we should live our life, how we should build our life. Let's say good evening to Trisha Shetty, advocate and founder for She Says NGO, Sneha Kalita, advocate with the Supreme Court, Rahul Eashwar, author and Hindu activist, Shadhan Farasat, advocate with the Supreme Court, Professor Alka Sharma, women rights activist, also joining me this evening. And actually, let me start off with Shadhan Farasat, because Shadhan, one aspect of this is the legal. And I think moral and social aspects aside, many people genuinely believe it is illegal for adults to live together if they aren't married.
Obviously, that's completely incorrect conception, because there's no law prohibiting two adults to live together, have sexual relationship, consensual sexual relationship together, and otherwise live just like any married couple would. And so that's a misconception. And in fact, if you look at it, a lot of live-in relationships are in fact a lot happier than marriages, because marriage is an institution. Of course, every religion recognizes it, but marriage is an institution which is also for the consumption of the society. So while couples pretend that there's a functional marriage, as we all know, there's so many marriages in which there is so much abuse, there's so much dysfunctionality. So I think even if we look at it from a sociological perspective, live-in relationships are as good, if not better, than marriages. So I don't think there is anything either legally or morally for us to judge live-in relationships vis-a-vis marriage that it is any better or any worse.
Legally or morally, we should not be judging, but actually, morally and socially, it's a big step. You would have to really go to the most modern, cosmopolitan part of our big cities to be able to get a place to live and live like any other couple does without people frowning upon it, Trisha. That is one aspect. We actually have examples of court orders where they have not only recognize live-in relationships, but also rights of partners. If upon the death of your partner, the woman does have right to inherit that property. Also, saying that the children out of such a relationship should not be called illegitimate.
You are right, and I really, really am heartened by the bench of justices today, Justice Divakar and Justice Srivastav, who made really what we would presume to be progressive statements, but also upholding the law, where they said that the personal autonomy is sacrosanct, that right to life and personal liberty is sacrosanct, and that they are guaranteed to us as fundamental rights, and they supersede any notions of social morality. And we must remember that we live in a country where the definition of rape has a legal exception, that no man can be charged with sexually assaulting his wife unless she is less than 15 years of age, which has now been amended to 18 to protect, rights of children. So in effect, you anyways are living under a law where marital rape is not recognized as a crime. And that obviously has grave repercussions, as we see often. And also, I think this judgment just is reflective of the society that we are in today and upholds those rights that are guaranteed to all of us. And we must keep in mind, like, we as an organization get a lot of cases where we've had, people from the LGBTQI community reach out to us and tell us that, their parents oppose them living in together, and they go to the police station and routinely use that as means of harassment, where the police, separates partners who are in consensual relationships, living together, and this adversely affects minorities, LGBTQI communities, where they have to lie about their relationship status. So I think the judgment where they've even pulled up the police and told them that they must protect the rights of individuals and protect them from harassment is certainly one to be celebrated today.
Yes, and what I want to emphasize is that I'm not looking here to have a conversation which is to say, live-in relationships versus marriage. I am looking here to have a conversation about each to his own. And as a society, we have to learn to accept that. Trisha, in fact, the point that you made is exactly what the cause of even this case in the Allahabad High Court. This couple that was living together, the police said that the woman's family repeatedly kept interfering and kept trying various ways to actually, end this live-in relationship. When they went to the police authorities seeking protection, they didn't get a response there as well. Now, adding to what you were saying, harassment happens, but at the end of the day, the police doesn't stand up for the rights of these people either, which is where it becomes even more tricky. And Rahul, that is where we have to really focus on, because the conversation is important such that people begin to open up their minds and say, okay, we're not going to be those judgmental, nosy family members or neighbors who don't allow anybody else to live the way they want to.
Everyone respects court, and in India, judiciary is having high place, and nobody contends that. No, it's nobody's contention that society is not evolving or changing. But having said that, a good percentage, a good majority of Indians still believe in old-fashioned, call it old-fashioned values of family, ethics, and we all believe that ethics and social norms are the basic and fabric of every society. So every society needs to keep the idea of family, the idea of marriage intact for it to survive. It's easy for us to say that live-in relationship is getting more and more accepted. But we have seen in many cases that there are a lot of exploitations. There are a lot of people who are getting cheated in live-in relationship. There are a lot of people who leaves it, in middle of the way. So live-in relationship, yes, it's an emerging reality. But having said that, monogamous marriages and family still has the hold, not only in India but world over. So it is ideal for media, civil society to encourage the notion of marriage rather than live-in relationship. Yes, those couples need to have some kind of guard. But having said that, the ethical fiber of a society, any society, is in the idea of monogamous marriages. And we have seen the bad experience of West, where it is declining, and a huge social vacuum is happening in the West. I believe we shouldn't blindly ape the West and go their way, rather find our own ways to celebrate people coming together, and family is the best way to have it.
But why do you say that in this concept we are blindly aping the West? Why can it not just be about people's choices here? And then deciding that at this point, maybe at this point or never, they don't want to get it registered as marriage.
Yeah, ma'am, can I point out one thing? A girl of age 18 or 19 having a relationship with a guy of age 24 or 25. After 2 or 3 years, the guy loses interest. The guy goes away. The guy dumps this girl. What happens to this girl? So in effect, there is a lot of space for exploitation. See, we know that many people do cheat people. Many people do a lot of bad things to women in the name of love or in the name of live-in relationship. So if we are not going to have preservative values, socially positive values, family upholding values, there are a lot of chance for exploitation and sexploitation. And unfortunately, many of it doesn't go reported either, because they are in live-in relationships. Yes, I agree with some of the contentions of Trishaji. There are issues in marriage, but marriage is the best available system in the world for people to come together, because there is sanctity of marriage, there is child rearing practices, there is better family coming together. Please remember, marriage is not only coming together of two individuals, it's coming together of two families. And extreme individualism will only backfire in the long run and backfire in the long term.
Okay, interesting points that you have made. I'm just wondering, Professor Aloka Sharma, I'm just wondering, Rahul here is saying that, after a few years, the boy can lose interest, walk out, and what happens to that girl? Supposedly, if they were married, and then they are expected to continue to preserve the sanctity of marriage and not get out of it, where does that leave that poor girl then?
Yeah, this point I want to add what Rahul has said. The basic thing what we have to understand is the law recognizes relationship in the nature of marriage, not live-in relationship. So the question of rights of women are involved. If a woman is living with a person which is a kind of relationship which is in the nature of marriage, meaning one step minus marriage, that is the formal ceremony of the marriage. If she is living in that kind of relationship, Domestic Violence Act protects her, and all kind of benefits which a wife can avail, that partner can also avail. But if it is a live-in relationship, meaning thereby, if suppose it is a weekend affair, or sometimes they meet, sometimes they go and they live, then law does not protect this relationship, and women will not get any benefit if the partner will leave her after some time. So what we have to understand is, if a woman is living in the relationship which is in the nature of marriage, meaning one step less, then the law protects her, right? And if it's a purely live-in relationship, our law does not recognize that marriage, that kind of relationship, and women will not get any benefit.
Can you explain this
Yeah.
as two examples? For
Yeah.
example, I understand that there was a Dhanulal versus Ganesh Ram case where the court did rule that a woman is eligible to inherit property after the death of live-in partner. That aspect may have been settled, but what does she lose out on?
Yeah, living partner, we have to see the nature of the relationship, what they have. Basically, they have the time and kind of relationship. Now, the Supreme Court has in many cases has given the parameters of deciding what kind of relationship will be considered as relationship in the nature of marriage, where all these kind of benefits can be given. There are certain parameters: how long they are living, how they are pretending to the society, whether they are visiting the relatives of each other, whether they are participating in social gathering as husband and wife, whether they have joint accounts, whether they have joint lockers, whether the kind of, whether they are having children. So many parameters are there in fixing the benefits to the women. So if it is a kind of relationship where weekend affair is there, or maybe they meet once in a month, or twice in a month, that kind of relationship will not be considered under the law as protected relationship.
Okay. Let me also bring in. I know many of you want to make a point, but let me also bring in Sneha Kalita, who's patiently heard everybody. Sneha, various aspects that we're trying to bring in. What's your view?
Yes, basically, I wanted to say that Indian society has gone in a paradigm shift when it comes to the living pattern, and yes, of course, now the people are opening up in living together, and if they are adult, if they are sound mind, why not? But yes, of course, the society, there is a taboo, like, when where the society, it's still continuously criticizing this kind of relationship. But having said that, now let us see the judicial intervention. Where there is a judicial intervention, let's not go into marriage versus live-in relationship, but the court intervenes whenever there is a miscarriage of justice. Now, whenever the couple needs the protection, when there is a there is a violation of fundamental right, Article 21, there's a right to live in a dignified manner. And if the couple is not getting that benefit, then I think in this, we are living in a very modern society. Yes, of course, but everyone has a choice to make. And I don't see that it is a like taboo, or it's a continuous progressive, the society is progressive, and if a couple are making a choice to live in together, let it be. Like, I don't see any such, and it's not an offense in the eyes of law. That's very important. And secondly, I would say there are certain judgments of Supreme Court on and on, going to the extent that are children born out of this kind of relationship, they have given a status, and they have in fact been given a right to property. And even Domestic Violence Act, when the partner has been abused, been threatened or abused, the Domestic Violence Act comes into the protection of the partner. So you have to be broad. I mean, people have to be now broader their mind to accept this.
Yes, Rahul Eashwar, how do we change this mindset? Again, I will emphasize, this isn't about marriage versus live-in. It's about people's choices. But if I want to live in with another individual, irrespective of even their gender, and I go from one building to the other, to another region of one part of the city to the other, looking for a place, and people won't allow. Residential RWAs will not allow, neighbors will not allow, landlords will not accept it. How is that right? What about my rights as an individual then?
Ma'am, true. There is a genuine point there. I don't think anybody disagrees. There is a genuine conservative versus liberal debate here. See, I'm proud to be a conservative. Trishaji might be a liberal. But beyond the conservative liberal debate, there are some spaces I believe everyone can agree. For example, Kerala Women's Commission and many women's commissions put forward an idea that there should be marital education, interpersonal skill education starting from college days, because people are starting to relate more even in their late teens or late colleges. any kind of premarital education, if you don't want to call it marital, if you can call it interpersonal skill education, this kind of education should be there. Our Christian churches have been at the forefront of doing it, and the results are amazing, because people need to be oriented towards life skills, interpersonal skills, healthy relationships in a meaningful way. Otherwise, in the impressionable teenage and the early young ages, people are prone to make many mistakes that can scar them for a lifetime. Anyway, relationships are important. I don't think there is any debate between conservatives and liberals on the idea whether relationships are important. We all acknowledge relationships are important. We may differ in the way we take those relationships, whether it is marriage, whether it is live-in relationship, whether you call it love, whether you call it special friendship, whether you call it by any name. Healthy relationships are the base of a society, and our youngsters need to have education, relationship education for it. And we have a great history, at least a history of 30 years of institutional education by the church.
Yeah, but you're talking about educating the youngsters or preparing them for relationships of all kinds. But what about educating their parents and their family members and the police, more importantly, the law enforcement agencies? What about preparing the rest of the system that has to allow them to exist in the way they want to?
That's true. I don't think anybody will be a moral police in 2021. I am not at all a moral police.
Let's be realistic. It happens literally all the time, even in the biggest of our cities. Trisha, would you want to come in here?
I just want to highlight something. Rahul Eashwar, when you were speaking earlier, you kept, drawing a correlation between marriage and ethics, and also saying marriage equals monogamous relationships, as though people in live-in relationships are not also in monogamous relationships. Just because you're in a live-in relationship does not mean you are not monogamous to your partner, right? And also, just because you are in a live-in relationship does not mean you're not in an ethical relationship. Now, that is the problem. When you look at certain relationships with your biased lens of what you think a person should be doing, how they should be living, how they should be engaging, if they are two consenting adults, then honestly, none of us have any say in how they should be in relationships with each other if they're not being violent. Now, another thing, I work in this space. I go to police stations. I will tell you, the attitude changes instantly when you come with a case of domestic violence, as opposed to a case where it is a stranger in a dark alley, or if it is, someone, who's you're not in a familial relationship with. When you're highlighting cases of domestic violence, as opposed to highlighting a case where, a woman has been raped, abused, and is seeking help, the attitude is completely different. It is ghar ki baat ghar pe rakho. Are you sure tumko ghar pe nahi sambhalna hai is baat ko? Are you sure you want to file an FIR? Are you sure you want to file a police complaint? This is an internal matter. Why don't you mediate between yourselves? So the attitude is different, and you must take that into consideration. And for everyone who keeps saying, this goes against ethics and values, where are y'all when women who are in marriages are fighting for their rights, are fighting to get justice after they've been abused, after they've been raped? Somehow suddenly everyone keeps quiet then, because then it is ghar ki baat ghar pe rakho. So, seemingly as women, we just cannot win. And another thing, Rahul Eashwar, you said, what if an 18-year-old gets dumped? A woman, what if an 18-year-old man gets dumped? I have equal sympathy for both partners. And that's where we need to be as a society, where we're trying to protect rights of everyone, regardless of if they're married or not.
Who gets more cheated? Let's be realistic to the ground reality. Who gets more cheated? Who gets more tortured?
To make this absurd statement, I'm sorry, I really don't.
You want to have an artificial balance and artificial equivalence, it's okay. It's just like saying that the rape law should be gender neutral. You can say this for being fashionable, but having said that, who suffers at the end of the day? Many women, many girls feel cheated, they ghost or complain, and this really happens. And there are many men who are cheat. So this is a reality that really happens.
No, so okay, even if you say that, that ties back to the point that you were only making, Rahul Eashwar, that we just have to raise them differently, we just have to educate them differently, we just have to make them stronger individuals who are able to take on these consequences if they choose to get into such relationships. But can we then say that the society starts shutting its door on it? That the society says, no, that the parents start harassing him? I mean, every legal case case that I was reading out where court has given a ruling in favor of a live-in, most of them have actually been about them seeking protection from their own families and the police saying, nahi, aapas mein decide kar lo kya karna hai, we can't do anything.
Ma'am, just please remember, we have a prime minister who said, let's start with the boys. Let's start with value education. I believe that's a proposal everyone agrees. One, yes, families need to be sensitized more. They should be acceptable about the evolving changes. Similarly, children should also remember they are being with the parents for 18 or 20 years. One fine day when the children walk out of their life saying that it is all our life, the parents will also feel shattered. They are growing these children up for the 20 years. They are spending their entire life for them. So children also have a responsibility to be responsible to parents. These children didn't come out of vacuum. These parents are spending their entire life. So when this point is raised, suddenly, no, the entire liberals frown up. Why? Does the parents not have any rights? Does the parents not have any say? They are growing up. These children come from families. Does the family have no say? One fine morning, you are 18, so you are on your own, and nobody has any right to say anything to you. Is it like that? So we cannot, in a very mechanical way.
No, you have the right to give as much advice as you want. The children's duty towards their parents is to take care of them, to not abandon them, to follow the family being together and to love each other. But it can't be that if the parent says no, we will not allow you to be with a certain individual, and then you say no, this is your culture, to just listen to them and abandon it. That choice maybe has to be left to the individuals once they're adults. Sneha Kalita, what do you think?
Yes. See, what the other co-panelist is saying about the exploitation. So when we talk about exploitation, it can happen after marriage, before marriage, like live-in relationship. So this is not the issue. The issue is here, the right of choice of an individual, the right to live in a dignified manner. And yes, of course, the parents has vis-a-vis duty, and yes, of course, the children would listen to them. But there has to be an understanding that let me take my own decision. Let's not be parent feed, like, the children, okay, aapko is ghar pe shaadi karna hai, aapko live-in mein nahi lena hai. Now it is not happening. You need to understand the society is progressive, it's changing. But yes, of course, I have stated earlier, there are challenges, societal changes. But then you need to see the perspective of that individual, whether she or he wants to live in together or she wanted to live after marriage, like, as a married wife. So this is not the point. Exploitation happens everywhere. And yes, of course, the law is there. Whether it's a living relationship, whether it's a marriage, law is there to take care of it. And whenever there's a miscarriage of justice, the law comes into picture, and the judicial intervention, we have seen in so many cases that there is a judicial intervention which has been the court has come in to intervene and to protect the partners.
Yes, I'll give this example. In one of the other cases which was being heard in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, the Haryana State Council submitted that live-in relationships are not legal and are frowned upon by the society. Thus, no protection can be granted to the petitioners. And that is where actually the court ruled and reminded the state about the Constitution of India, which is the supreme law of the land. Right to life and liberty is enshrined therein and is treated as a basic feature. But that's the problem. Shadan, you wanted to come in. That's the problem, when law enforcement also refuses to step in to protect you and your life in such cases.
I think what we are talking about is relationship choice discrimination. Let's put it that way. So you choose a certain relationship choice, and the state reacts to it in a completely, violent fashion. Nobody has a problem. My parents may disagree. I may be able to negotiate, may be able to make them agree to it. All of that is fine. I agree with Rahul that's between the parent and the adult grown-up child now. But the point is, how does that entitle them to get to the police and then use the police force again? So that's where when the state comes in this relationship choice, that's when the discrimination begins. And the same thing happens when you are denied housing. So I think what we need laws, apart from non-discrimination on the basis of religion, sex, sexuality, even on relationship choice, we need laws which expressly say that just because you have chosen a certain kind of relationship, you should not be discriminated against. Rest of it is, of course, a private matter between me and my family. Maybe I'm able to convince them of my values. Maybe they are able to convince me of what they believe is the right value. That's fine. but there should not be a state-based discrimination or the societal ability to deny me of housing and things like that.
Yes. Okay. So we've discussed the part where it's the state's responsibility to protect them, recognize as individuals, and all of the rights they have, and none of that goes away just because two individuals decided to live together, be in a relationship, and not get married. The second aspect, Shraddha, and that's what a lot of the young couples or even the middle-aged couples who may choose to not get married but live together would say, is that they don't get accepted in the society. Now, do I have the rights if landlord after landlord and RWA after RWA says, no, we will not give you an apartment in this society? Do I have a legal recourse there?
No, I think so. As of today, there is no legal recourse because no law expressly prohibits in that sense. I think there should be a Right to Equality Act in India, which should prohibit discrimination based on all the grounds which are expressly recognized in Article 15 of the Constitution, as well as sexuality and relationship choice, etc. Once that law comes in, then I can, go and say, okay, this person denied me housing based on my relationship choice. So that is not present today, and therefore I don't have a remedy, and therefore this can, be when couples are targeted, it's impossible. Just like in certain areas for religious minorities, it is impossible to get housing. So these are the realities, and we actually need a Right to Equality Act in India, which prohibits and bans discrimination on these bases.
Yeah, Trisha, this is, I think, also a conversation that we need to have on the legal aspect of it and what are my rights. Because, for how long will couples then struggle or hide? Then it comes back to the point you were making. We have to hide. We have to pretend. Youngsters will have to pretend they don't really live with each other. They're just visiting. People will frown upon it. And all of that nonsense, which is really not required.
Exactly right. And also, as you rightfully pointed out, when do we see these cases coming up? More often than not, when it is cases of interfaith marriage, right?
Yeah.
It is also cases of LGBTQI people wanting to live together, and when parents seemingly disapprove of the relationship status as a whole. And we've seen this interference not just in live-in relationships, but also people who have been legally married. We have seen cases where courts have intervened in cases of two consenting adults who've had to come out and say they fear for their life. We've seen multiple cases like this of, then they come up with this whole love jihad angle, which is a whole other debate for itself. And this is something that needs to be looked at seriousness, that what authority does anyone have to interfere with what two consenting adults choose to do, whom they choose to live with, whom they choose to share their life with? And where does this societal lens of ethics come in? And to Rahul Eashwar's point, about should parents not have a say? Of course, I can have a say, my parents can have a say, but their say is limited to an opinion, which they don't get to legally enforce onto their child once the child is over the age of 18 years old. That is the point of turning into an adult, right? You gain certain status, you can vote, you can drive. You don't have to ask your parents, whom do I vote for? You don't have to ask your parents, should I drive my car or not? If you can, afford to buy your own car. So this point about having an opinion is very well said and valid, but you don't have a legal right to dictate who your child should marry. And if you oppose the person your child is married to based on their sexual orientation, based on their religious orientation, you honestly don't get a say in that matter.
And unfortunately, example after example, educated families, uneducated families, urban families, rural families, higher class, middle class, irrespective, are examples where such couples get harassed. And that becomes problematic. But I come back to, what I was saying earlier about finding a place to just live, which has become such a big issue. There was this example of a couple, a story that I remember came out in 2015, where a couple that had been together for a really long time, had been, in a relationship for a really long time and decided it was just better if they live together, share their financial burden, share that all of the time that is available to them together, couldn't find a place. To the point then where Professor Aloka, they had to resort getting what they said was a fake marriage certificate because people were actually asking for marriage certificates before, renting out the home. Now what changes? The couple continue to live like that. How is it going to impact the landlord's life or the neighbor's life, whether they're legally married or not?
The question is not that the law is there. Of course, there is no law which protects. Now, of course, we have a law in this kind of relationship, which is a long relationship. Law protects this. see, our society needs the awareness and sensitization. There are many laws. For example, we have laws since 1961, Dowry Prohibition Act, which strictly prohibits dowry, but it is prevalent in the society. People give, people take, and it is a social acceptance. So you see, making something legal, illegal by the legislature is one thing, but acceptance by society is another thing. So if the society does not accept a particular law, it will never be implemented. So whatever you say that we have Article 21, we have right to equality. If we are adult and we have a choice to choose our partner, fine, that is okay. But who will make this the society understand that we have this kind of concepts, we have this kind of rights? So these are two different things. Legal provisions are one, and in the practice in society, acceptance by society is another. And that is why we say that until and unless society accepts any law, it is impossible to implement that law in the society. So we have to sensitize, and yes, you are right that there is no difference by getting the fake certificate of marriage. There is no difference. But my point, my concern is only one, that if the relationship is not that long, if the relationship is weekend affair or sometime affair, then definitely women is at disadvantageous position. So my concern is that the legislature should also go ahead and incorporate some kind of protection to the women in cases of purely live-in relationship, which is not protected now. I say that it is not protected as such. So the rights are not protected. So there should be more steps. Yeah.
Okay, I am out of time, so I'm going to thank all of the panelists for joining us. And you know, here is what I just want to leave everybody with. This is the thought. If we become more accepting of it as a society, legally it's there, it's not illegal, it's not a crime. As a society, if we become more accepting, it just enables the couples to live a normal, regular life, like a regular relationship as it would be for anybody else, married or not married. The families can be more accepting of it, and if the families are more accepting, then it literally just works as a marriage would work, where you also interact with the families, you look after them, you are in that kind of a bond. But if you oppose it in the society, as a family member, as a landlord, as a neighbor, then you're just making it something which is not allowed, which is looked down upon, which is only going to force people to do it secretly. They're going to come up with innovative ways to do it secretly. They're not going to stop. A healthy society would mean that we all begin to accept it a little bit more openly. And that perhaps would give a lot more of these relationships a chance to find their own way in normal circumstances. It's the mindset that has to change. The law exists. The mindset that it is a sin that has to now change. Thank you for joining us.